Okay, so the reaction I got from this story was one that I have never seen before. I had more people unfollow my account in one shot than any other story that I've ever posted online. Mark Zuckerberg says the White House was wrong to pressure Facebook about COVID posts and regrets not being more outspoken about it. This story was first ran as an exclusive by the Wall Street Journal. They were able to obtain a letter that was sent from Zuckerberg to the chair of the House Judiciary Committee, Jim Jordan. For those of you who don't know, Jim Jordan, he's the guy who wears those extremely ugly, pale yellow ties on every TV appearance he makes on Fox News. Yeah, that Jim Jordan. So the House Republicans, which we'll get into in a little bit here, they've been running investigations throughout their entire term here while they've been in control of Congress this time around. Zuckerberg responded to one of those investigations by sending a letter to Jim Jordan, and this is what the letter stated. So there's a lot of talk right now about how the US government interacts with companies like Meta. And I want to be clear about our position. Our platforms are for everyone. We are promoting speech and helping people connect in a safe and secure way. As part of this, we regularly hear from governments around the world and others with various concerns about public discourse and public safety. Now, here's the key. In 2021, senior officials from the Biden administration, including the White House, repeatedly pressured our teams for months to censor certain COVID-19 content, including humor and satire, and expressed a lot of frustration with our teams when we didn't agree. Ultimately, it was our decision whether or not to take content down, and we own our decisions, including COVID-19 changes we made to our enforcement in the wake of this pressure. I believe government pressure was wrong, and I regret that we were not more outspoken about it. I also think we made some choices that, with the benefit of hindsight and new information, we wouldn't make today. Like I said to our teams at that time, I feel strongly that we should not compromise our content standards due to pressure from any administration in either direction. We are ready to push back if something like that happens again. Now, this next part here, while not exactly pertaining to the first paragraph that we just read, I think will become a little more pertinent later in this story here. So I want to read this next part that was also in the letter. In a separate situation, the FBI warned us about a potential Russian disinformation operation about the Biden family and Burisma in the lead up to the 2020 election. That fall, when we saw a New York Post story reporting on corruption allegations involving then Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden's family, we sent that story to fact checkers for review and temporarily demoted it in waiting for the reply. It's since been made clear that the reporting was not Russian disinformation, and in retrospect, we shouldn't have demoted the story. We changed our policies and processes to make sure that this does not happen again. For instance, we no longer temporarily demote things in the US while waiting for fact checkers. I like that he mentioned there that they don't do that in the US, as in they might be doing it somewhere else. Okay, so before we get into the ramifications of everything that Zuckerberg just said in that letter, let me just first talk about why these investigations are happening a little bit. So, when the Republicans took over the House in, well, they won the midterm, majority in the last midterms in 2022 elections. And when they took over control of the House in January of 2023, they said that they were going to do a bunch of essentially like revenge tour type investigations. They were going to go after Dr. Fauci, which you have seen that now happen. They were going to try to impeach Joe Biden, which some people did try to do, but it was kind of ultimately shut down. And they also wanted to go after big tech for censoring their speech, to which Republicans, in my opinion, they're not really against, censorship. They just don't like the fact that their speech is being censored. And they feel as though these tech platforms have been going after them, and now they feel as though they're kind of being given a victory lap because they're saying that this COVID-19 information must have been conservative speech that was censored, even though in the letter that we just read, Zuckerberg does not specify what types of information was censored, what types of posts were taken down. None of that was really specified. And I do think that that's a problem, that nothing was specified in there. But conservative members of the House are taking this as kind of like a wink and a nod that it was conservative speech that was in fact censored, and they've been saying so in posts that they've made recently. This is by the House Majority Whip Tom Emmer. He said that the House GOP has long known that the Harris-Biden administration pressured Facebook to censor Americans. and that there was an intentional assault on our First Amendment rights. This is abuse of power and it must end now. Another Republican, Diana Harshberger, she's a Republican from Tennessee, said that Zuckerberg finally admits what everyone already knew, that Facebook throttles conservative speech on their platforms, and that this is a great win for free speech. Conservatives must continue to put pressure on government media censorship. And finally, another Republican from Florida, Representative Vern Buchanan, said it's time to finally hold big tech accountable for their blatant censorship of conservatives. Now, again, nowhere in this letter does Zuckerberg state what was actually taken down, to which I have a huge concern about that myself, because while he's openly admitting that they censored information on their platform, to which whether or not that's okay is a whole separate discussion, but nowhere does it really say what types of information was in fact censored. It almost feels like the Republicans are telling on themselves that they feel as though that their speech would be censored because it was something, there was something wrong with it. But before we get into all of that, the one thing I will want to note here is that, the White House actually did not deny any of this. In fact, they came out and defended the fact that they did do this. So they are in fact admitting it. The White House actually came out with a statement saying that they encourage responsible actions to protect public health and safety. Our position has been clear and consistent. We believe tech companies and other private actors should take into account the effects of their actions that have on the American people while making independent choices about the information they present. So they are affirming that they did in fact reach out to Meta, that they did in fact put this pressure on them, and that yeah, I mean, they completely validated this story. So what's left here is just to kind of sit with the context of all of this, because when I first put this story out there, I'd mentioned at the top here that it had like a really like strong backlash on my Instagram community when I put it out there. What I put there in the post was that, this did in fact happen. And are you okay with this or are you not okay with this? Please leave a comment below. And for the people who actually, didn't just immediately unfollow my account for having the audacity to post the story in the first place because of the connotations around this, which we can get into, the people who did reply, a lot of them seem to be in favor of this, just under the assumption that if Meta did in fact censor information, that they must have done so in a benevolent fashion, that they must have been going after people who were spreading disinformation, vaccine skepticism, that they were going after right-wing trolls. And, personally for me, I am troubled by this story because it just feels like another story about an entity in our country that has immense power, and we have no idea what they're doing, and they're largely left unchecked. I mean, there really is no oversight at the end of the day for how Zuckerberg monitors posts that are on Facebook, on Instagram, and we're kind of just left hoping that they constantly do the right thing, but they wield tremendous amounts of power in our country. So it's something that really just kind of is upsetting to me, that we just don't know more, that we don't have really any control over it, that the people who kind of like flip the switches and the levers, we just have no idea what exactly is happening, in the halls of Instagram and Facebook, as far as what they decide is information that's worthy of staying on their platform and what information isn't. And it kind of just comes back to the old debate about whether or not these platforms are private companies or are they the public square. Because if it's the public square, then it is kind of a breach of First Amendment rights because you are censoring speech. And on the other hand, if they're a private company, they should be able to do whatever the hell they want to because they're a private company and we're on their platform, and just get over it. So I am starting to feel like it kind of has to be treated like the public square. They have so much power in our society that they can influence elections. They can influence marketplaces. They can influence, I mean, public discourse. They can influence, I mean, whether or not people know what's happening in the world around them. They have truly incredible power. These tech companies do. And so we may want to believe that they are acting in a benevolent fashion, that they are, in fact, censoring bad information, that they are trying to make sure that public panic isn't stirred, or that people aren't just putting out the worst information possible and manipulating people into thinking that vaccines are bad or what have you. But the problem is that we just don't know. And Zuckerberg hasn't told us. So this is the first that we're hearing about it. He's finally admitting that this is happening, but he's also not giving any kind of clarification as to what was done, like what posts were taken down. Why did they come to the conclusion that they needed to be taken down? Were accounts that were suspended, were they reinstated afterwards? I think these are things that we as the public need to know because of just how ingrained these platforms are now into our society. And so I would like to believe, like anybody else, that maybe they went after information that they thought was truly dangerous, but also what is that line? Because to a degree, what one person might find to be dangerous, another person might find to be necessary information. So where do you draw that line exactly? What is dangerous information? And how do you know when it's worth censoring something? Because to a degree, one person might think that they're doing something benevolent and good. Another person might be thinking that you're stifling free speech and not allowing for conversations to truly be able to take form because people aren't operating with all the information they might need in order to make an informed decision. So I don't, this story was very troubling to me. It still feels like there's like a lack of information of what we don't know. And I'm just a person where I'm very skeptical of people in power. So when I first saw this story, I didn't immediately think to myself, oh, well, they must be censoring the bad stuff. My immediate thought was, we have no idea. We have no idea. I mean, and I'm tired of giving people in power the benefit of the doubt. Like, I don't want to just assume you're doing the right thing. How often do we see people in power actually doing the right thing? It's very rare. And so it also lets me think about what might be happening in other areas, like with other parts of the world right now, like in that area over in the Middle East. What information are they censoring about that right now? So when I saw this story, I just felt like people need to be aware of what these platforms are doing. We spend so much time on them, and they have an immense amount of unchecked power. And I think that for society, that kind of needs to be reined in, or else it might actually get worse, the amount of information that's being kept from us. Thank you for watching this video of Independent Thought. If you liked the conversation, please go ahead and give the video itself a like, and be sure to subscribe for future episodes on the channel.